The broken promise the last transmission commander James Rivera stood on the observation deck of the orbital defense station, watching Haven's Rest burn below him. The planet had been humanity's crown jewel, a world of vast oceans and emerald forests where 3.7 billion people had built, a civilization that merged technology with nature. Now it was dying, and he could do nothing but watch. The Zarati swarm had arrived 6 days ago. Their ships, organic and pulsing with bioluminescent light, had torn through Haven's Rest defensive perimeter like it was made of tissue paper. James had commanded the defense fleet with everything he had, but humanity's military forces were designed for peacekeeping, not genocide. The Galactic Assembly had promised protection. They had guaranteed that any member species under attack would receive immediate military support from the combined forces of 43 advanced civilizations. That promise now seemed like a cruel joke. James pressed his hand against the transparent aluminum viewport, feeling the cold surface against his palm. Behind him, his communications officer, Lieutenant Sarah Chun, worked frantically at her station. Her voice had grown hoarse from repeating the same emergency broadcast for 6 days straight. This is Haven's Rest Defense Command to Galactic Assembly Central. We are under attack by Zarati forces, requesting immediate military intervention per Treaty of Sanctuary. Article 7. Casualty count now exceeds 2 billion. Please respond. We are dying here. Only silence answered. The same silence that had answered every transmission for the past 144 hours. Commander, Sarah said, her voice cracking. New planetary scan results. The Zaroti have reached the southern continent. That's where the evacuation centers were concentrated. James closed his eyes. 1 billion people had fled to those centers, believing the assembly fleet would arrive in time, believing that the galaxy's most powerful military coalition would honor their treaty, believing that civilization meant something. Keep broadcasting, James said quietly. Someone has to hear us. Someone has to care. The assembly's silence, 3,000 light-years away, in the gleaming crystal chambers of the Galactic Assembly headquarters. Ambassador Victoria Osei stood before the Council of 43. She was humanity's voice in the galaxy, a woman who had spent 15 years building relationships and trust with alien species. Now she stood alone, surrounded by beings who refused to meet her eyes. The Thalorian hierarch, a towering being of crystalline structure and ancient authority, presided over the emergency session. His voice resonated through the chamber like wind through caves. The Assembly has reviewed humanity's petition for military intervention. The matter requires careful consideration. Careful consideration? Victoria's voice echoed in the vast chamber. 3 billion humans are already dead. How much consideration do you need? The Kalrathi representative, a serpentine creature with scales that shifted through rainbow colors, spoke next. The Zarati incursion is unfortunate, but humanity established Haven's Rest in contested territory. The colony's location violated several unwritten protocols. Unwritten protocols? Victoria felt her composure slipping. The Treaty of Sanctuary makes no mention of unwritten protocols. Article 7 explicitly states that any member species, under existential threat, receives immediate defensive support. Article 7 assumes the threat is unprovoked. Interjected Ambassador Vrex of the Korthan Empire, a massive being resembling an armored bear. Humanity's expansion rate has been aggressive. 47 colonies in 60 years. Perhaps this Zarati response is a natural correction to human overreach. Victoria stared at Vrex in disbelief. Natural correction? You're calling the systematic extermination of billions a natural correction? The hierarch's crystal form pulsed with pale light. The Assembly will vote on military intervention. All in favor? Victoria watched in horror as not a single representative raised their appendage, tentacle, or manipulator in support. 43 species sat in judgment, and 43 species chose to do nothing. Opposed? Only 3 representatives voted against intervention: the Korthan, the Kelrathi, and a species called the Vornithi, who had territorial disputes with human colonies. Abstentions. 40 hands rose. 40 species chose cowardice disguised as neutrality. Victoria felt something fundamental break inside her. Not hope, that had died days ago. This was deeper. This was her faith in civilization itself, shattering like glass. "You're condemning billions to death," she said quietly. "You're proving that your promises mean nothing, that your treaties are worthless, that your civilization is built on lies." The hierarch's tone remained cold and formal. "The Assembly has spoken. This session is concluded." Victoria turned and walked from the chamber. Behind her, she heard the representatives beginning to discuss trade agreements and shipping routes, as if they hadn't just sentenced an entire world to extinction. As if human lives meant nothing at all. The Discovery DR. Keiko Tanaka had spent 30 years in intelligence analysis. She specialized in communication patterns, data flows, and the invisible threads that connected galactic civilization. Her work had helped humanity navigate the complex politics of the Assembly, identifying allies and understanding the subtle power dynamics between species. Now, her skills had revealed something that made her blood run cold. She stood in the secure briefing room beneath Tokyo, facing a wall of holographic displays. Each display showed communication intercepts, financial transactions, and movement records spanning the past 3 months. General Nathan Cross stood beside her, his weathered face growing darker as she explained what she had found. "They knew," Keiko said, her voice steady despite her rage. "The Assembly knew the Zarati were coming to Haven's Rest 6 weeks before the attack began." Nathan's hands clenched into fists. "How is that possible? The Zarati don't communicate with Assembly species." "They don't communicate officially," Keiko corrected. "But I've tracked data exchanges between 17 Assembly species and Zarati intermediaries. Look at this." She highlighted a series of transactions. 3 weeks before the attack, someone provided the Zarati with updated defensive schematics for Haven's Rest orbital platforms. Someone gave them our patrol schedules. Someone even identified the locations of our emergency evacuation centers. Nathan stared at the evidence, his expression transforming from shock to something harder and colder. "Which species?" Keiko brought up a list. The Korthan Empire provided military intelligence. The Kelrathi Consortium supplied navigational data. The Vornithi League gave them our communication encryption codes. But it goes deeper. I found evidence that the Assembly, Hierarch himself, delayed calling the emergency session until it was too late for any intervention to matter. Why? Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. "Why would they do this?" "Because we scare them," Keiko said simply. "Humanity went from 1 planet to 47 colonies in 6 decades. We've matched or exceeded most Assembly species in technology. We don't play their political games. We don't accept that some species should dominate others. We represent change, and they want to stop us. Haven's Rest wasn't an attack we failed to prevent. It was an execution they arranged." Nathan was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was like iron. "Does the Security Council know? I'm briefing them in 2 hours. But Nathan, you need to understand what this means. We can't trust the Assembly. We can't rely on their protection. If we want to survive, we need to depend only on ourselves." "Then we will," Nathan said. "Show me everything you've found. Every species involved, every transaction, every betrayal. We're going to need evidence when we present this to Earth's leadership." Asterisk Keiko began transferring the data to a secure drive. "What do you think they'll do?" Nathan's smile was cold and terrible. "Something we should have done centuries ago. Something that will make the galaxy remember why humanity survived when stronger species went extinct. We're going to show them what happens when you betray us. The emergency summit, the Global Security Chamber, had been built during Earth's first expansion into deep space. Located beneath the Himalayas, shielded against every form of surveillance known to exist. It had hosted only 3 previous emergency sessions. Now it held representatives from every human government, military branch, and colonial authority. 400 people gathered to decide humanity's future. Asterisk. The Korthan had provided Haven's Rest defensive schematics to the Zarati. They had identified humanity's weak points, had helped plan the massacre of billions. Now they would learn the price of that decision. General Korthax sat in his command chamber, reviewing troop deployments across 17 star systems. He was a massive being, even by Korthan standards, his armored hide scarred from 100 battles. He had personally authorized the intelligence transfer to the Zarati, believing humanity needed to be taught humility. Now he studied reports of mysterious attacks across Korthan space with growing unease. "Sir?" His aide entered the chamber. 3 more outposts have gone silent in the past hour. No distress calls, no signs of battle. They simply stopped transmitting. Korthax growled deep in his chest. "Double all security protocols. I want sensor sweeps every 30 seconds. Nothing enters this facility without." He stopped. His aide was staring at something behind him, eyes wide with terror. Korthax turned slowly. Sarah Reeves stood 3 meters away, her armor's stealth field deactivated. In the dim light of the command chamber, she looked like death itself. Her black eyes reflected the glow of tactical displays. Her expression was calm, almost peaceful. "How did you?" Korthax began, reaching for his weapon. Sarah moved. To Korthax's enhanced warrior reflexes, she seemed to teleport across the space between them. Her hand caught his wrist before his fingers touched the weapon. The bones shattered with a sound like breaking stone. "For Haven's Rest," Sarah said quietly. "For 3.7 billion humans who died because you broke your promise." Around the command center, alarms finally began to sound as security systems detected the other operatives. But it was already too late. The Korthan military's entire command structure was in the room, and the apex operatives were among them like wolves among sheep. What happened next took 17 seconds. When it ended, the Korthan Imperial military had no command staff, no strategic coordination, and no capacity to launch offensive operations. Sarah and her team vanished back into the shadows, leaving behind only a message repeating on every frequency. APEX remembers. APEX responds. Apex never forgives. Similar scenes played out across 42 star systems simultaneously. The assembly sphere grows in. The crystal chambers of the Galactic Assembly. Panic had replaced the usual careful diplomacy. Representatives from 17 species demanded emergency sessions, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of fear and confusion. The hierarch struggled to maintain order as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Kelrathi consortium had lost its entire governing council in a single night. They vanished from their secured palace, protected by the finest military technology in the galaxy, and simply ceased to exist. No bodies were found. No evidence of forced entry. Just absence where the most powerful beings in their civilization had been. The Vornithi. League's communication networks had been systematically dismantled. Not destroyed, dismantled. Every satellite, every relay station, every quantum communicator had been taken apart with such precision that engineers couldn't understand how it was possible. The Vornithi couldn't coordinate their military, couldn't govern their colonies, couldn't even communicate between their home worlds. The Zarati hive worlds continued to fall silent. The count now stood at 23 worlds, representing 60 billion lives. Survey teams found the same scene everywhere. Infrastructure intact, systems running, but every single Zerati gone without a trace. It was as if something had reached into their collective consciousness and simply switched them off. Ambassador Talrix of the Zenthari stood before the assembly, her insectoid form trembling with agitation. The Zenthari had been humanity's only allies, the single species that had voted in favor of intervention at Haven's Rest. Now she spoke with barely controlled fury. "I warned you," Talrix said, her voice resonating through the chamber. "I told you that abandoning Haven's Rest would have consequences. I begged you to honor the treaty. You called me naive. You said humanity would accept their loss and move on. Look at what your arrogance has created." Vrex stood, his massive form seeming smaller now. "We didn't know they had this capability. How could we have known? You should have honored your promises regardless." Talrix's wings flared in agitation. "You should have protected them because it was right, because you had sworn to do so. Instead, you calculated that humanity was too weak to matter, too young to be dangerous. You forgot the first lesson of galactic history. Never underestimate a species that survived planetary extinction events and clawed its way to the stars through determination alone." The hierarch's crystalline form pulsed with pale light. "We must respond. We cannot allow terrorism on this scale to go unpunished." "Respond how?" Talrix demanded. "You can't find them. You can't detect them. You can't fight what you cannot see. And more importantly, you have no moral authority left. You broke the most sacred treaty in galactic civilization. You arranged the murder of billions. Humanity is simply teaching you what happens when you prove that promises mean nothing." The chamber fell silent at that truth. Finally, the hierarch spoke again. "What do you suggest we do?" "You surrender," came a new voice from the entrance. Every head turned. Standing at the chamber's entrance was General Nathan Cross, flanked by Ambassador Victoria Ase and Dr. Keiko Tanaka. They wore simple black clothing, no military insignia, no diplomatic regalia. Behind them stood 6 figures in dark armor, their faceplates transparent, revealing human faces with predators' eyes. "You're not authorized to enter this chamber," the hierarch said. Though his voice lacked conviction, Nathan walked slowly down the central aisle, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. The 6 Apex operatives followed, and despite the hundreds of security personnel in the building, no one moved to stop them. "Authorization is irrelevant," Nathan said calmly. "We're here to deliver terms, not request permission." He stopped at the center of the chamber and looked around at the assembled representatives. "You wanted to know what humanity was capable of. You're finding out. 30,000 Apex operatives are currently active across your territories. They're inside your governments, your military installations, your most secure facilities. You'll never find them all. You'll never stop them all. And they'll continue their operations until our terms are met." Vrex found his courage. "This is terrorism. Mass murder. You're violating every law of civilized warfare." Victoria stepped forward, her voice cold as ice. "Like the laws that said you would defend us? The laws you broke when you arranged for Haven's Rest to be destroyed? The laws you violated when you helped the Zerati find our children?" She held up a data chip. "We have evidence of every communication, every transaction, every betrayal. 17 species actively participated in genocide. The rest of you stood by and did nothing. Don't talk to us about civilization. You proved that word means nothing." Keiko activated a holographic display showing the scope of Apex operations. 60 billion Zerati eliminated. Not killed in battle, simply removed. The entire Korthan military command structure neutralized. Kalrathi government dissolved. Vornithi infrastructure disabled. And we're just beginning. The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Representatives shouted over each other, some demanding retaliation, others pleading for mercy. The hierarchs struggled to restore order. Nathan's voice cut through the chaos. Silence. The authority in his tone made even the most powerful beings in the galaxy pause. Nathan looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had thought themselves untouchable. "Here are humanity's terms," he said. "First, the Treaty of Sanctuary is dissolved. We will never again trust the Assembly to protect human interests. Second, all restrictions on human expansion and colonization are removed. We will settle where we choose, when we choose. Third, every species that participated in the betrayal of Haven's Rest will pay reparations. The amount will be calculated based on the lives you helped destroy." "We'll never agree to this," Rex growled. One of the Apex operatives moved. The motion was so fast that most representatives didn't even see it. Suddenly, the operative stood directly beside Rex, one hand resting gently on the massive alien's shoulder. Rex froze, feeling strength in that grip that could crush his bones to powder. "Fourth," Nathan continued as if nothing had happened, "you will provide full intelligence on the Zerati. Every communication, every weakness, every secret. We're going to finish what you helped them start. Fifth, any species that threatens human colonies or citizens in the future will face immediate and total retaliation. Not your militaries, you, your governments, your infrastructure, your ability to function as civilizations." The hierarch's voice was barely a whisper. "And if we refuse?" Sarah Reeves stepped forward, removing her helmet. Her black eyes reflected the crystal light of the chamber. When she smiled, several representatives physically recoiled. "Then Apex operations continue until there's nothing left of your civilizations except ruins and warnings," Sarah said softly. "You have 72 hours to accept these terms. For every hour after that deadline that you delay, one of your worlds goes silent. Choose carefully. The Zerati Homeworld Asterisk." Deep in the Zerati core territories, on the throne world where the Overmind commanded their entire species, something unprecedented was happening. The Zerati were a hive mind, billions of individuals connected through quantum entanglement into a single consciousness. They had conquered 17 species before joining the Assembly. They knew no fear because they were essentially immortal, their consciousness distributed across their entire population. Now they were learning what it meant to be afraid. Apex. Team Sigma, led by Commander Marcus Rivers, had penetrated the throne world's biological defenses through means the Zerati couldn't understand. They moved through the living structures of the Hive City, invisible to the Zerati's quantum senses, undetectable by their biological security systems. Marcus had lost his entire family on Haven's Rest, his wife, his 3 children, his elderly parents. All gone. He had volunteered for the Apex program 2 centuries ago because he believed humanity needed guardians. Now he was something else entirely. He was vengeance given form. The team reached the Overmind's chamber, a vast biological cathedral, where the central intelligence of the Zerati species resided. The Overmind was enormous, a mountain of neural tissue and bioorganic computing systems. It controlled every Zerati in the galaxy through quantum links that transcended space and time. "Contact established," Marcus said through the team's thought link. "Initiating upload." The device they carried wasn't a weapon in any conventional sense. It was something humanity's best scientists had created specifically for hive mind species. A quantum virus that would propagate through the Zerathi's neural network, severing the connections between individuals and the Overmind. It wouldn't kill them. It would do something worse, that it would make them individuals. Give them personal consciousness, personal fear, personal awareness of mortality. It would transform billions of components of a single mind into billions of separate beings, each suddenly alone in the universe for the first time. Upload complete, Marcus said. Extraction in 30 seconds. The Overmind's massive form shuddered as the virus spread through its neural pathways. Its voice, when it came, was transmitted directly into the minds of every human in the chamber. It was the sound of a god dying. "What have you done?" Marcus looked up at the enormous being. "We've given you something you took from us. Vulnerability, mortality, fear. Feel what our children felt when you devoured them. We were following nature. The strong consume the weak. This is the law of the universe." "Then learn a new law," Marcus said coldly. "What humans protect, you do not touch. What humans build, you do not destroy. What humans cherish, you do not take. Break this law and we will make you wish you had never evolved consciousness at all." Team Sigma vanished into the shadows, leaving the Overmind to experience its new reality. Across Sarati space, billions of individuals were waking up to awareness of themselves as separate beings. The hive mind was fragmenting, and with it, the Zarathi's power was dissolving. They would survive, but they would never again be what they were. Humanity had reached into their collective soul and rewritten what it meant to be Zarati. It was a form of warfare the galaxy had never imagined. The assembly submits 60 hours. After Nathan Cross delivered humanity's terms, the Galactic Assembly called an emergency vote. The debate was brief. The evidence of human capability was overwhelming. The fear was absolute. The vote was unanimous. All terms accepted. The hierarch transmitted the formal acceptance to Earth, then added a personal message. "We underestimated you. We thought youth meant weakness. We thought seeking peace meant inability to wage war. We were catastrophically wrong. The galaxy will remember Haven's Rest. We will remember what happens when we break our promises to humanity." In the secure chamber beneath Tokyo, President Marcus Chan received the transmission. Around him sat the leadership of humanity, the people who had authorized Protocol Apex and changed the course of galactic history. "It's done," Marcus said quietly. "They've accepted our terms. All of them." General Nathan Cross nodded. "Order. All Apex teams to cease offensive operations and move to observation protocols. Keep them deployed, but inactive. The galaxy needs to know we can strike at any moment." Victoria stood, looking at the holographic display showing human space. "What have we become?" "Survivors," Keiko answered. "We did what needed to be done." Haven's Rest demanded justice. 3.7 billion voices deserved an answer. "But at what cost?" Victoria pressed. "We've terrified the entire galaxy. We've proven we're capable of systematic, calculated violence on a scale they never imagined. They'll never trust us again." Nathan's voice was hard. "Good. Trust is what got Haven's Rest destroyed. Let them fear us instead. Fear keeps you alive when trust fails." Marcus looked around at the faces of humanity's leaders. Protocol Apex remains active indefinitely. The operatives stay deployed. The galaxy needs to understand that humanity will never again be vulnerable. We sought peace because we believed in civilization. They proved civilization was a lie. Now we'll enforce peace through strength. 10 years later, the memorial on Earth stood in Geneva, where the final decision had been made. 3.7 billion names were carved into walls of black stone that stretched for kilometers. People came from across human space to walk those walls, to remember, to grieve. Commander James Rivera stood before one particular section of the wall. His fingers traced the names of his crew, the people who had died defending Haven's Rest, while the galaxy watched and did nothing. He had survived, had commanded Apex operations in the years since, had become one of humanity's most decorated officers. "They never forget, do they?" said a voice beside him. James turned to find an elderly Zentari female, Ambassador Telrix, now retired from the assembly. She looked at the memorial with her compound eyes gleaming. Your people remember too, James said quietly. You were the only ones who tried to help. And we've benefited from that, Talrex admitted. Humanity has been generous to the Xanthari. Trade agreements, technology sharing, military cooperation. But I sometimes wonder if we wouldn't have done the same as the others, if we'd been in their position. You didn't, though, James said. That's what matters. You stood up when it counted. The others made a different choice. Talrex gestured at the memorial. Was it worth it? All the fear, all the violence, all the changes to the galactic order. James was quiet for a long moment. 3.7 billion people died because the galaxy broke its promise. We made sure that would never happen again. If that required becoming something darker, something more dangerous, then yes, it was worth it. He looked up at the sky where stars were beginning to appear in the evening light. Humanity has 200 colonies now. A population of 12 billion spread across the galaxy. Every human child grows up knowing they're protected, not by treaties or promises, but by the certainty that anyone who threatens them will face consequences beyond imagination. That's the legacy of Haven's Rest. And the word APEX? Talrex asked. James smiled slightly. It spread through the galaxy faster than any message in history. In 100 languages, on 1,000 worlds, they know what it means. It means humanity's response to betrayal. It means that we remember. It means that we're always watching. He turned back to the memorial. The operatives are still out there, you know. 30,000 ghosts moving through the galaxy, invisible and eternal. The Assembly thinks we've recalled them. We haven't. They're watching, waiting, making sure the promises are kept this time. That sounds like living in a prison of fear, Talrex observed. It's living in a galaxy where promises are kept because the alternative is unthinkable, James corrected. Before Haven's Rest, the Assembly made treaties they didn't intend to honor. Now they honor every agreement because they know the cost of betrayal. We didn't make the galaxy better. We made it more honest. Talrex was silent for a moment. I hope it was worth it. I hope humanity can find its way back to seeking peace instead of enforcing it. Maybe someday, James said, but not yet. The galaxy hasn't earned our trust back. It'll take generations. Until then, we remain what they forced us to become. We remain APEX. The final message in the Galactic Assembly chambers, now operating under the new protocols humanity had imposed. A memorial had been installed. It stood as a reminder of the cost of broken promises. The memorial was simple. A black stone with one word carved in every known language. APEX beneath it, an inscription in the common galactic script. Here marks the moment the galaxy learned that humanity seeks peace not from weakness, but from mercy. Test this mercy at your peril. Remember Haven's Rest. Remember the price of betrayal. Remember that we will always respond. The memorial stood as a promise and a warning. The galaxy had learned its lesson in blood and fear. Treaties were now honored absolutely. Human colonies were left in peace. The expansion of humanity continued, unchecked, driven by a species that had proven they would do whatever necessary to survive. The age of naive humanity, believing in the goodness of galactic civilization, had ended in the fires of Haven's Rest. A new age had begun, an age where humanity enforced the rules they had once trusted others to follow. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, 30,000 Apex operatives continued their eternal watch. They were humanity's insurance policy, humanity's vengeance, humanity's promise that Haven's Rest would never happen again. The galaxy had learned the meaning of the word APEX. It meant summit, the highest point, the ultimate expression. But it also meant something else, something the species that betrayed humanity would never forget. It meant that humanity, when pushed to the edge of extinction, when forced to choose between civilization and survival, would always choose survival. And they would do it with a precision, efficiency, and calculated ruthlessness that made even the oldest species in the galaxy afraid. Haven's Rest was gone, but its legacy lived on in every treaty honored through fear, in every promise kept because the alternative was unthinkable, in every human child growing up knowing they were protected not by the mercy of others, but by the strength of their own species. The word apex had changed the galaxy forever, and humanity, transformed by betrayal from idealistic newcomers to the galaxy's most feared species, stood watch over their own, ensuring that the lesson of Haven's Rest would echo through the stars for millennia to come. The story of humanity's response to ultimate betrayal was complete. They had issued their order in a single word, and the galaxy would never be the same. Asterisk.